At dinner, Dad said in front of everyone, "You'll never be trusted with anything important. I wish we never had you." My siblings laughed as my father nodded. I said nothing. I just nodded quietly and left. Next time we saw, he was the one begging me to save his life. Before we get started, like this video and share with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Now let's get right into it. When most people think of family dinners, they picture reconnect ion, genuine laughter echoing around the table, stories shared over warm food, the comfort of belonging. Mine were nothing like that. My family dinners were marked by dark memories I wish I could erase, words that cut deeper than knives, and laughter that was never with me, but always at me. The dining table became a courtroom, and I was always on trial. My father, the judge, passed his sentences with a pointed fork and a cold stare. My mother sat beside him like a silent jury, never once raising an objection. And my brothers? They were the executioners, grinning as they twisted every word into another blade. We had barely begun eating when it happened. My father leaned back in his chair, wiping his mouth with his napkin, and fixed his gaze on me. That gaze, cold, assessing, like he was about to read a verdict. "You," he said, his voice thick with disdain. He lifted his fork, pointing it at me like a judge slamming down his gavel. "You can't be trusted with even the simplest things." The air seemed to thin around me. My fork froze halfway to my lips. My cheeks burned, but I kept my face still. Dad wasn't finished. He rarely was. Every time we give you responsibility, something goes wrong. Always excuses. Always failure. That's why your mother and I don't rely on you anymore. Why should we? My brothers snorted. One of them shook his head slowly, lips curled into that smug grin he'd worn since we were kids. The other leaned back in his chair and muttered under his breath, "Some things never change." The table erupted in a low chuckle, as if I had just performed a comedy act at my own expense. My mother didn't laugh. She didn't even look at me. But the silence she offered cut deeper than laughter. She pressed her lips together, eyes down, as though my father's words were undeniable truth. And in her silence, she chose his side. I forced myself to swallow the lump in my throat. My instinct screamed to defend myself, to say that's not true, to list all the times I had picked up after them, fixed their mistakes, covered for their failures. But I knew the script too well. If I defended myself, they'd twist it. If I cried, they'd mock it. If I shouted, they'd call it disrespect. So I stayed quiet. My father shook his head, clearly unsatisfied with my silence. "See? Nothing to say. That's what happens when you know it's true." One of my brothers leaned forward, smirking. "Maybe we should trust her with something small like folding napkins. Think you can handle that?" The laughter that followed hit me harder than any slap could. But I didn't give them the reaction they wanted. I took a breath, deep and steady, then set my fork down gently on the plate. My movements were calm, deliberate, as if I were performing a ritual of control in the middle of their chaos. I folded my napkin with care, laid it across the table, and pushed back my chair. My mother finally looked up. "Where are you going?" "We're not finished." Her voice was sharp, almost panicked, like my leaving broke some unspoken law of obedience. I met her gaze and held it, not long enough to start a fight, but long enough to let her see that I wasn't afraid. Then I stood, smoothed the front of my shirt, and walked away. My father muttered something under his breath. My brothers laughed again. My mother sighed, the sound of someone resigned to disappointment. I kept walking. Out of the dining room. Past the hallway. Toward the front door. Each step was measured, steady, almost too calm for the storm I felt inside. When the night air hit my face, cool and sharp, I exhaled for the first time since my father's words. The sky stretched above me, dark and endless, a reminder that the world was bigger than their table, their rules, their cruelty. But still, the echo of their laughter clung to me. I looked back once at the house, glowing with warm light, filled with voices that had never once made space for me. Then I turned away, whispering to myself the thought that had been clawing its way through my chest since dinner began. If they don't trust me, then one day, they'll learn what it means to truly have no one to trust. And with that, I disappeared, That would be the last time I'd visit that house. I don't belong there anymore. If I close my eyes, I can still hear it. The sound of my name spoken like a punchline. It wasn't always direct insults. Sometimes, it was worse, the subtle dismissals, the kind of cutting remarks that left bruises on the inside where no one else could see. When I was 8, I had a birthday party. At least, that's what I thought it was supposed to be. I invited 3 girls from school, the first time I'd ever been brave enough to ask anyone to come over. I helped my mother bake cupcakes, carefully placing sprinkles on top, imagining laughter and games. The girls arrived shyly, holding little presents wrapped in bright paper. For a moment, I felt like I belonged, like maybe this would be the day my family treated me like I mattered. But then my brothers barged in. They grabbed the cupcakes, smeared icing on each other's faces, and turned the gathering into their own playground. The girls laughed at their antics, slowly drifting away from me, forgetting I was the one who had invited them. When I tried to protest, my father barked, "Oh, let them have fun. Stop being so controlling." Controlling. That word stung worse than anything. My own birthday, stolen, and somehow it was my fault. By the end of the night, my friends barely remembered I existed. They left giggling about my brothers, leaving me with unopened gifts that felt more like pity than celebration. By the time I reached 13, I had stopped expecting fairness. My brothers were the sun around which my parents revolved. Every achievement of theirs was magnified, polished, displayed like a jewel. Every mistake of mine was dragged out into the light, dissected, and stored as proof of my inadequacy. I remember one evening when my report card arrived. Straight A's. I had worked for weeks, pouring every ounce of energy into my studies. I placed the paper on the table with trembling hands, waiting for their reaction. My father glanced at it, nodded once, and said, "That's what we expect. Nothing special." The next day, my brother came home with a C in math. Instead of scolding him, my parents patted his back. "You'll do better next time," my mother said gently. They ordered pizza to cheer him up. I sat in my room that night, staring at my perfect grades, wondering what it would take for them to see me. The necklace was the moment that carved itself deepest into me. I was 15. My mother had misplaced her favorite chain, and panic rippled through the house. "It's not here," she cried, rummaging through drawers. Her voice rose sharper with every second. "Who touched it?" No one spoke. Then her eyes snapped to me. "You. Where is it?" "Me. I didn't." "Don't lie. You're always sneaking into things that don't belong to you." The accusation cut like a knife. I had never once touched her jewelry. My brothers smirked, piling on. "She probably tried it on. She does weird things like that." I shook my head furiously. "No. I swear, I didn't touch it." But my father's glare silenced me. "Enough. You can't be trusted. You never could." The chain was found 2 days later, stuck in the laundry. My brothers laughed about it. My parents never apologized. And I learned something important. In this house, innocence was irrelevant. My voice was irrelevant. Truth itself was irrelevant. Still, there were slivers of light. Moments where I almost believed I belonged. Like the night I was 16 and sick with the flu, burning with fever. My mother sat by my bed for an hour, pressing a damp cloth to my forehead. For a moment, I thought maybe she loves me. Maybe, beneath all the disappointment, I matter. But the next morning, when I spilled juice on the counter, she snapped, "Useless girl. You can't even hold a cup properly." The warmth of the night before evaporated, leaving me colder than the fever ever had. Or the time my father took me to the store, just the two of us. I thought it was a chance to bond. But halfway there, he said flatly, "We only brought you because your brothers are busy." And just like that, the hope dissolved. Year by year, piece by piece, I stopped showing them who I was. I stopped bringing home art projects. I stopped talking about the books I loved. I stopped asking them to watch me perform at school. Why hand them another weapon to use against me? At home, I became a shadow. Quiet. Careful. Invisible. But inside, a seed was growing, watered by every insult, fed by every dismissal. A seed of anger, yes, but also of resolve. One day, I'll prove them wrong. One day, they'll see the truth. And perhaps the cruelest part? A small, fragile piece of me still longed for their approval. Still dreamed that one day, they might turn and say, "We were wrong about you. We're proud of you." That dream kept me tethered to them, even as they tore me down. But dreams like that don't last forever. By the time I reached 17, I thought I had mastered survival in that house. Stay quiet. Stay small. Don't give them anything they can twist into proof of your untrustworthiness. But the thing about living as a shadow is that shadows still get stepped on. It was during the summer before my final year of high school. My father had just received an important delivery, a set of documents for his business that needed to be handed to his partner by the next morning. I wanted to prove myself, even after years of failure in their eyes. So when he asked who could drop it off, my heart leapt before my mind could stop me. "I can do it," I said quickly. "I'll go straight there. I promise." The room fell silent. My brothers looked at each other, smirking. My mother raised her eyebrows. My father laughed, not a warm laugh, but sharp and mocking. "You deliver something important. You'll probably lose it on the way." Heat rose to my cheeks. "I won't. I promise I can do it." He shook his head. "No. Better not risk it." Then he turned to my brother. "You take it. At least I know it'll get there." I watched as my brother grabbed the envelope, grinning at me like he'd won a prize. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows across my walls. It wasn't just disappointment I felt. It was the dawning realization that no matter how much I tried, I would never be given the chance. They would never see me. 2 months later, my mother asked me to watch the house while they were gone for a weekend. I remember how my chest swelled, finally, a responsibility. Something that mattered. I kept everything spotless. I double-checked the locks, watered the plants, even left little notes to show I'd been thorough. For once, I felt useful. But when they returned, the first words out of my mother's mouth weren't "thank you" or "good job." They were, "Where's the vase?" I stared at her, confused. "What vase?" She pointed at the cabinet. A decorative vase, one I hadn't touched, had a small crack along its side. "You broke it," she accused flatly. "No, I didn't. I never." "Don't lie. This is why we don't trust you. We give you one job, and you can't even manage that." My father sighed in disappointment. My brothers snickered from the doorway. And just like that, even my one chance at trust became another brick in the wall they were building around me. I think the final crack came during my high school graduation. I had worked harder than I ever thought possible, pouring myself into my studies as though good grades could buy their love. And it worked. I graduated near the top of my class. When I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I scanned the crowd for my family. I needed to see their faces. Just once, I wanted pride. I found them easily enough. My brothers were slouched in their seats, looking bored. My mother was busy scrolling on her phone. My father clapped politely, his expression neutral, like I had done nothing more than tie my shoelaces. That night, I overheard him talking to a neighbor on the phone. "Yeah, she did well enough," he said casually. "But you know how she is. Can't be trusted with anything real." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't anger, not the hot, fiery kind that explodes and fades. This was colder, sharper. A clarity I had never felt before. I realized, in that moment, that their approval was a mirage. I could chase it my whole life and never touch it. And so, the breaking point wasn't loud. It wasn't a fight. It was silent, like a door closing inside me. I stopped caring about being seen by them. And slowly, I began to imagine a life where I didn't need them at all. That was the night I promised myself something. One day, I'll build a life where my word matters. One day, I'll be trusted not by them, but by myself. And when the day comes that they finally need me, I'll remember every time they laughed, every time they dismissed me, every time they broke me. Leaving wasn't one dramatic moment. It wasn't a slammed door or a shouted goodbye. It was quieter than that, a slow, steady walk toward freedom that they barely noticed. When I turned 18, I told my parents I was moving out. My mother raised her eyebrows, unimpressed. You? On your own? You won't last a month. My father smirked, swirling his coffee. Go ahead. Maybe life will teach you responsibility, since we clearly couldn't. They didn't argue. They didn't try to stop me. In fact, their lack of resistance hurt more than their words. It was as if my presence had never mattered enough to hold on to. I packed 2 suitcases, one with clothes, the other with the few things I had managed to keep safe from ridicule, a small stack of books, my journal, and the crumpled certificate from school that no one had cared about. As I shut the door behind me, I whispered to myself, let this be the last time their voices drown mine out. Freedom didn't taste sweet at first. It tasted like burnt coffee, sleepless nights, and rent checks that nearly drained me dry. I worked 3 jobs in those first years. A diner waitress in the mornings, a cashier in the afternoons, and a receptionist at night. My body ached constantly, my feet blistered, my eyes burned. But every paycheck, no matter how small, was mine. Mine, untouched by their judgment. Every bill I paid, every meal I bought, was proof that I could survive without them. There were nights I cried myself to sleep from exhaustion. Nights I doubted myself, hearing their voices in my head. You can't be trusted. You'll fail. You're useless. But then the morning would come, and I would drag myself up again. Because even in my lowest moments, there was something new inside me, a seed of belief, fragile but alive. Maybe they were wrong about me. I saved every penny I could. While others my age spent weekends partying, I was in the public library, devouring books about finance, business, and investments. Numbers made sense to me, they were logical, reliable, unlike people. I taught myself how to budget, how to invest in small things, how to grow money instead of watching it disappear. Slowly, carefully, I began to build a life that didn't depend on anyone's approval but my own. At 21, I opened a tiny online shop selling handmade crafts. My family never knew. If they had, they would have laughed. But I kept it quiet, letting it grow in the shadows, just like I had grown. By 25, that silly shop had turned into a business. Not huge, not glamorous, but steady, and steady was something I had never been allowed to be. I still remember the first time I signed my name on a lease for a small office space. My hands shook as I held the pen, not from fear, but from the weight of what it meant. For years, my family had told me I couldn't be trusted with anything important. And here I was, holding keys to something that was entirely mine. I whispered into the empty room, my voice trembling but real. They were wrong. They were all wrong. I didn't speak to my family much. They didn't ask. When we did talk, the conversations were shallow. My mother would boast about my brother's achievements, jobs, marriages, their so-called successes. When she asked about me, it was always with that same edge in her voice. So, you're managing? You're not in trouble, are you? I'd smile into the phone, keeping my victories to myself. I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry. Because I had learned something powerful, my success didn't need their validation. In fact, it was sweeter without it. But as I grew stronger, as my business expanded, as my life finally began to feel like mine, I couldn't shake the thought. One day, they're going to fall. And when they do, they'll come running to me. And that day would be the moment I had been waiting for all my life. I always imagined the day would come suddenly, like lightning, bright and violent. But it didn't. It came slowly, in whispers and rumors, the way rot eats a house from the inside before the walls finally collapse. It started with my father's voice on the phone. For years, our conversations had been short, perfunctory, even dismissive. But this time, his tone was strained, almost hesitant. Your mother told me you're doing all right, he said, as though the words were foreign to him. That business of yours, it's still running? I could hear the tension in his throat. Pride didn't let him say what he really meant. We need you. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the office I had built, the glass windows, the desks filled with employees who respected me, the company logo gleaming on the wall. Yes, I said simply, savoring the pause that followed. The stories trickled in one by one. My eldest brother's guaranteed investment had gone under, swallowing his savings. My other brother had been caught in a workplace scandal that ruined his career. The golden boys, the ones who could do no wrong, were now fragile glass figurines shattered on the floor. And I was still standing. Stronger than I had ever been. For the first time, they looked at me without smirks. Instead, there was something else in their eyes: unease. The real moment came one evening when my mother showed up at my office unannounced. I hadn't seen her in months. She looked smaller, worn down, her eyes darting nervously around the reception area. When she saw me, she forced a smile. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling. We could use your help." I let the silence stretch between us. For years, she had turned her eyes away when I needed her most. And now, here she was needing me. "Help," I repeated softly, as if tasting the word. She nodded quickly. "Your father's business, it's struggling. The boys, too. We thought maybe." I cut her off with a smile. The same smile I had worn that night at the dinner table years ago, when my father told me I couldn't be trusted. Only, this time, it wasn't defiance masking pain. This time, it was power. "Funny," I said, leaning against my desk. "I remember a time when you told me I couldn't be trusted with even the smallest things. Now you want me to handle the big things?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes glistened with something dangerously close to tears. I didn't rush to comfort her. I let the silence do its work. Because this wasn't just about revenge. It was about truth. About making them see the daughter they had buried alive under years of ridicule and shame, and realizing she was the one they now depended on to survive. I didn't give her an answer that night. I told her I'd think about it, watching the relief and fear mingle across her face. But deep inside, I already knew. This was my moment. My stage. My reckoning. And when I made my choice, it wouldn't just change my life. It would rewrite the history of this family forever. I had dreamed of this moment for so long that I thought it would feel like fire, sharp, burning, destructive. But it didn't. It felt like ice. Cold, controlled, precise. I invited them all to my office. My father, my mother, both my brothers. They arrived together, just as they always had, a united front that once towered over me. Only now, they looked smaller. My father's shoulders hunched under invisible weight. My brothers avoided my eyes, their bravado stripped away. My mother wrung her hands like a schoolgirl caught lying. I let them wait in the glass conference room while I finished a call. I wanted them to see my employees walking past with respect in their eyes. I wanted them to feel, if only for a few minutes, what it was like to live in my shadow. When I finally stepped inside, their eyes followed me the way prey watches a predator. My father was the first to speak. "We need an investor. Just enough to get us back on our feet." His voice cracked on the word need. I savored it. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands neatly on the table. "And why should I trust you with something like that?" The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. My brothers shifted uncomfortably. My mother whispered, "Please, sweetheart. You're our only chance." For years, I had begged for scraps of their approval. Now they were begging for mine. I tapped my pen against the table, slowly, rhythmically. "If I help you," I said, drawing their desperate eyes back to me, "it will be on my terms." My father frowned. "Terms?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady, deliberate. "You'll sign over controlling interest in the company. You'll step aside, all of you. I'll run things from now on." The shock on their faces was delicious. My brothers opened their mouths in protest, but one look from me silenced them. My mother's lips trembled. My father's face flushed with anger. "You're asking me to hand over everything I built," he growled. I smiled. "No. I'm offering you a chance to save what little is left. Without me, it all crumbles. With me, at least the name survives." For a moment, I thought he would refuse. I could see the war in his eyes, pride battling desperation. But desperation always wins when you've already lost everything. His hand shook as he reached for the pen. One signature, and the empire he had once boasted about at every dinner table was mine. I watched him sign, and in that moment, I felt no pity. Only justice. As they stood to leave, my father paused at the door, his eyes full of something I had never seen before, fear. "You've changed," he said quietly. I met his gaze, steady and unblinking. "No. I just stopped believing the lies you told me about myself." He said nothing more. None of them did. They walked out of my office in silence, the same silence they had once forced upon me. Only this time, I owned it. And that was my revenge. Not loud, not violent, not cruel. But absolute. I didn't destroy them. I did something worse. I made them live in the shadow of the daughter they once said could not be trusted. If you enjoyed this video, like and share with your friends. Let's hear your thoughts on this. Do you think Alia's decision was a mistake to work with the people that never trusted and humiliated her? Was her revenge enough? Subscribe to this channel so you're among the first to get new stories like this. Thank you for watching.